Hi everyone, I want to talk about how to start industry engagement without compromising your teaching or research. Now there's a lot of things I want to cover, but we will make it very, very short and cover 4 areas. That is baby steps. If you haven't started, where do you start? How do you find your footing? Then social media, how to make best use of that with the end game of actually getting collaboration in some form. Then we have media interviews very, very quickly, and then integrating teaching and research. Ultimately, we want to bring it home to students. They give you greater authority when you come into the classroom, and that's what we're all about while we are academics. Okay, we know that COVID-19 has hit most industries like a brick. Everyone agrees that post-COVID-19 will be different, a new business reality. Indeed, COVID-19 is likely to create new teaching opportunities, new research and industry engagement opportunities right for the booking. But how many of us, teachers, researchers, thought leaders, have put together a list of points, a top 10 list for what is likely to happen post-COVID? No, we don't know, but all the consulting firms are doing it. What's stopping us from doing it in our own discipline that we know so much about? Whether it's accounting, finance, management, marketing, supply chain, whatever. All of us could put together a top 5 list and start showing some thought leadership in this area. So are you ready with talking points when the media knocks on your door to interview about your future? Like, this is what McKinsey said in the past week regarding the new reality post-COVID, digital speed, ready to reinvent, all in, data-driven decisions, customer followers. All right, they're saying lots of things post-COVID, based on case studies, not full of specifics, but this is what we can do as academics to think deeply about our discipline. What would change, what will stay the same post-COVID? And this is a general ask of everyone that I feel in academia needs to think about. Okay, why? Why would you get started in industry engagement? Well, ultimately, some of you think, well, consulting, is that one reason? Maybe takes time, takes a long time, and you need to go all in to be successful and effective at the same time. What about KPIs? Universities now using KPIs as a driver of industry engagement. That's what they hope. But industry will see through any scam or any bullshit, BS, that you are trying to make yourself out as being an industry engaged academic just because you are following KPIs of your institution. So don't rely on KPIs to make a start, okay? Indeed, the real reason for you to start industry engagement is to think in terms of the patients, the students. Without patients, there is no doctor. Without students, there is no teacher. You are not seen as a gatekeeper, rather you are viewed as a teacher mentor. It's all about developing your authority. You're an expert. It's about developing your respect among your peers, but also among your students that you teach. Ultimately, that should be the real reason why you want to do industry engagement, because you want to bring it back home to the classroom for your students. So where do you start? You start with, who are you? What is your identity? A lot of us, we set up our LinkedIn profile and we say, oh, professor of accounting, professor of finance, and blah, 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 blah. But what's important is to think about, what are you curious about? What is your favorite topic? If you had to watch a 30-minute how-to video, what would that topic be? Because your curiosity is what is going to drive you sustainably through engagement with industry, because it takes a long time. And so this may help sharpen your sword for where you're going to go with your industry engagement. Maybe it is not the actual designated discipline that you are expert in. Maybe you have a curiosity in another discipline. That curiosity will take you much further than your PhD knowledge of another discipline that you no longer have curiosity about. Next, choose your niche. Okay, so we're going to talk about the profession and the industry, the association, regulatory bodies. What are we talking about here? I want you to think about, if you're curious about the plastics industry, maybe there is a plastics industry association in Malaysia that you can get in touch with, reach out to, and have a coffee meeting with some of the associations. Maybe your fintech, if you're curious about, then you reach out to the fintech association, make contacts with them, talk with them, get to know the people, the network in that area. In other words, be very focused in your niche. Don't try and be all to all industries. All right, is an association that you want to be associated with, a profession like accounting? Is it CPA Australia? Is it MICPA? Is it CIMA? Is it ACCA? Right, ACCA. Okay, so choose your niche, be very, very focused. Like what I did here with the Background of China Supply 1000 project, I really started out with a pilot study, talking to industry and designing a survey, but I talked to industry a lot. I did a lot of pilot studies with electronic companies in that area. Then after doing the face-to-face interviews, I went back and presented to industry before I even developed a working paper for academia, because I was really curious to hear what industry had to say about what I learned through the pilot studies. Okay, so we also want to think about your network. Obviously, during COVID, there's no physical network, but there is a physical network out there, but it's accessible through social media, LinkedIn. And that's why for the second part of this presentation this afternoon, I want to talk a little bit more about LinkedIn, because it's going to sustain your networking power, especially during COVID and even post-COVID. So where do you start in LinkedIn? That's the big question. Well, first of all, set up your account to be of service. In other words, what you say about yourself should relate to people that come to your site and thinking, I know exactly how that person can help me. So if you see my LinkedIn profile, I said professor. Of course, that's more of an academic brand, but I make it very, very clear where my expertise is. And here I say I'm an advisor to China and IoT supply chains, global supply chain trainer, editor, Tech Asia YouTube. Very, very clear. People know when they come to my site what I can give advice on. Of course, I'm a CPA. I could give advice on accounting, but so could thousands of other people in LinkedIn. But not as many people, I believe, can give advice on China and IoT supply chains or do global supply chain training, especially from a CPA accountant's perspective, which focuses much more on measurement and operations in the organization. So start small, focus on your niche. Who are you in terms of how you can help others? Who are the influencers in your area? Follow them. Next, I want to talk about Gary Vaynerchuk and his book, Jab, 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 Right Hook. This came out over 10 years ago, but it is a bestseller and something you want to think about, how we approach the mass of information, social media, posts, blogging that's going on around the world. How do you get your voice heard? And it was very, very big in boxing. You jab, 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 and then the right hook. And the right hook becomes a call to action. A right hook becomes your chance to ask for something. It doesn't mean you're going to get it, but it gives you permission to ask because you have been jabbing for a while. So what does jab, jab, jab mean? In terms of social media, jab, jab, jab means giving comments, posting a reference on someone, writing short articles, writing an article, posting a summary of a lecture you gave this week with a photo of a PowerPoint slide. As you can see here, I've given some activity of what I did in the last week. And also I've said I've made a top 10 list here. And you can see my top 10 trends post-COVID in global supply chain management. Now, these may be right or wrong, but this is what I believe based on my knowledge of the area, my curiosity, and my ongoing learning and understanding of that area. These are my top 10 ideas that I think are relevant. So we get comments from people saying, well, I think there's another item that you may have missed. And then I learn, we all learn together because that comment goes in LinkedIn, everyone can see. Another way that you can jab, jab, jab is actually post a summary of a lecture you gave this week with a photo of a PowerPoint slide. Ultimately, Being a connector is an ultimate give. What does that mean? It means that you're connecting someone who needs help with someone who can provide that help. Often people that need help will DM you, they would direct message you in LinkedIn and ask you for advice based on what your byline says. And then that's your opportunity to, maybe you can give some advice, but at the same time, recommend someone else who can give you even more help specifically to what is being asked of you. So it's not like that you have all the answers yourself, but being a connector is still a very good way of having a positive influence in the social media, especially LinkedIn. Here's some examples of what I've done in LinkedIn in the last 6 months. You'll see that I was asked to do a media interview for China Rising. As preparation for that, I created this framework of what I think are the different areas and strategies of multinationals and SMEs in the post-COVID world. I drew it out and then I posted that to LinkedIn, and even that got nearly 1,000 views. What I did shortly after was actually made a digital copy of that, and you can see further on the left, you can see my first rendition of the digital copy, and that was received very, very well with 725 views. Then I upgraded that and made it even better several days later, and then that got over 1,000 views. So this is what we mean by iterating. You're actually learning while you're on social media. Here's an example of another graphic. People like diagrams associated with fintech areas that are dominated by startups in different areas of Southeast Asia and North Asia as well. Put ideas out there to get feedback from industry. So I put this top 10 list out there, and then I get a feedback from someone on the other side of the world suggesting that restoration of supplier confidence is probably the biggest challenge. And that's something I never thought of. Maybe that replaces one of my other top 10 ideas. So, this is an ongoing development of what is the top 10 areas that you think are going to be post-COVID supply chain world. Next, we want to have a look at the right hook. Like you've done all the work with the jab and actually trying to provide service out there and helping people. Now you're going for the ask. And here are some examples where I've asked one person to join our retreat and give a talk about the latest fintech issues. There's another guy that I've talked to about trying to get access data to audits done on suppliers over the last decade. There's another person that's head of KPMG, one of the areas of KPMG, and talked to him, taken out for coffee to pick his brain about AI and how it's affecting the digital services of banks in this fintech disrupted world. And also I talked to another professor many times over coffee, and he actually came and actually gave a presentation to Monash earlier this year. So this is what we mean by the right hook, where you actually ask and you really getting industry engagement in terms of presenting or access to data, and also learning about your industry niche, which is very, very important for driving your research forward. Okay, so what about media interviews? Because as you develop your platform, as you develop your brand in the social media, you are going to be asked invariably for an interview, especially if you put yourself out there as being an expert in a particular niche. And so when I was asked to do an interview, the first thing I do is put down talking points, or actually ask before the interview, do you have any specific questions you're going to ask? I get those questions, and then I make up my own talking points associated with those questions, aligned with those questions. So getting those talking points, developing responses and to the issues associated with each point. And you may also think of 3 points to summarize in your area or issue. Rehearse before you give the media interview by just making a collection of PowerPoint slides, maybe 6 or 7 PowerPoint slides with responses to those talking points, and then you read out the questions and then you answer them, and you actually create a blog in that way. Integrating teaching and research. This is where we get up to our fourth area of what I want to cover today, and this is the ultimate benefit that you want to drive towards with industry engagement. Now, on the teaching side, having guest speakers is really, really nice to have. Students love that, but they also appreciate and get to see if you are associated with that guest speaker. So if you were to go out and interview past graduates about their first 3 years in their profession, or interview seasoned professionals about current trends and opportunities, and then you play that video for students to watch in your unit because it's related to specific topics in that unit, then students associate you, the teacher, with authority figures out there, and then they start to see that you are an authority yourself. You're an authority because you are connected with other authority figures. Okay, so this is the big point I want to make here with regard to teaching, is about creating your presence in front of students, not as an academic, not as a teacher, but as an authority, as an expert in your area. Just because you have a PhD doesn't make you an expert. When we are trying to impress upon millennials, Generation X, the young ones today, but when the young ones see you interviewing, associating with maybe celebrities, but maybe celebrity thought leaders, then they immediately see that you are an authority because you are in connection with them. That is the new reality in the social media, and that overflows into the teaching classroom. Another point about teaching is debates and arguments in the social media help strengthen your teaching influence. So if you go into LinkedIn social media and you get involved in the debates and arguments in your specific niche area, then that strengthens your thinking about all the issues. It strengthens your understanding about not just your side or your version of the arguments, but also what are the counter arguments, what are the counterfactuals, and then that makes you a stronger authority in your area. Further, and ultimately, we want to think about data. We all want data. Public databases as a general go-to, especially in accounting, especially in finance and economics for the most part. And if you're relying on financial market data and want to have a sustainable research agenda, then publications in A++ journals, then I believe you need to collaborate with a senior professor who actively publishes in the Financial Times 50 or the UT Dallas list of journals. I'm sorry, but if you want to get into the top journals, you need to work with professors who are already published in that area, because your competition are the thousands of Chinese, Russian, and other developing nation students who are running data 24/7. And they're not going to lose a night's sleep when it comes to running data and getting data out. It's very hard to compete with that. What I've chosen to do is maybe the long and lonelier road is to work with getting access to private data, proprietary data. And that comes from being in the field, developing relationships and connecting people and developing your authority and being out there. And over time, I've had success with several instances, and the examples are given here. Johnny Dang, CFO of a Chinese firm in Wuhan, where we published a paper in Abacus 2015. Annie Wu, a student who's a CFO of HTC, we're revising a working paper based on data from HTC. I met Mike Bellamy, a passive innovator, in 2013, and now we're working on a working paper based on data from supplier blacklist data, which he owns today. I met Renaud Adgeron of Sofeast Audit Services, and we're talking about getting access to data that he has processed over the last 6, 7, 8 years. I'm in discussions with the COO of Asia Inspection, but that failed when he left in 2018. I also met Product IP, the team there, gave a presentation for them in 2015, and in discussions with them to hopefully do something with their data. These are long roads. That's the message I want to give across to listeners of this presentation. Some examples of some of the areas of research I'm thinking of also now is trying to work with Pivot 88 to understand more and hopefully do some research on how they are digitalizing the management system of supply chains. And the digitalization of the management of factories is even much more important now, because under the COVID and post-COVID world, it's less likely that people can visit the factories like they could 2019 and before. And Pivot 88 has a digitalization solution, and it'd be very interesting to actually study that as a research topic. Some of the other ideas, coming out from Product IP, I've already spoke about that, and I've already spoken about that, where we're looking at trying to think about what are the characteristics of companies that are selling into EU, and relating those characteristics to the extent they have actually met the compliance regulations required by the EU countries. And not much is known about that, the extent of compliance. Product IP have data on that, and it'd be really nice one day if I could get access and we can study that in more detail as a research study. Number 3, this is something getting away from industry, but much more of a survey, but being focused on particular industry because it is near and dear to the COVID experience that we're having around the world in 2020, and that is face masks. Now, it's not about the problem of the quality of face masks being produced, but it's more a problem of the challenges being faced by face mask producers, brought about because of the regulations required by the countries they are operating in, their factories, and also international regulations on face masks, and how the regulations are forcing the face mask producers to actually learn and actually improve what they are doing, because a lot of them have rushed into this area to make face masks and they were not aware of all the full regulations associated with that. So there's learning going on in a very, very short time of these factories, and I'm always interested in researching areas, specific industry niches, where learning is taking place at a very, very fast rate. So there you have it, just the conclusions of what I want to talk about this afternoon. What is your unique gift? And it's very, very important before you go on industry engagement to think about what is unique about you, and you need to really find out your niche. And when it comes to social media like LinkedIn, it takes time, and you need to make it a habit to actually give all the time. And that's what we mean by jab, jab, jab. And then once in a while you can do that right hook, where you ask for help, where you ask for advice, where you ask for that coffee meeting, where you ask for someone to come and give a presentation to your students. And so media interviews is the third point I want you to take away. You need to have talking points. You need to prepare before the interview. You need to know what is going to be asked of you in that interview. So that's why you need to prepare beforehand, to have talking points, to be able to summarize even at the end of the media interview, this is what you think that your listeners, your readers need to take away at the end of our interview. Next, you need to be seen by students as a thought leader, and that's the ultimate test of your authority. But you need to be seen. You need to be seen, okay? When the students see you as the authority. Having a PhD does not make you an authority in the students' eyes in this day and age, okay? Publishing lots of research articles does not make you an authority in front of students in this day and age. You need to be seen as being engaged with industry, being alongside, connecting with authority figures if you are not there yet. Students will relate that authority figure to you and actually assume that you have authority as well. Finally, proprietary research data access is icing on the cake. And that's something that I've always looked for and always been curious about in trying to get, and because that makes your research more interesting, and that sort of makes you different from the average researcher out there. So this is O'Connor talking about how do we get the most out of our industry engagement, being focused. Media interviews are going to come. You're always looking to be authority when you're teaching, and also getting data as an icing on the cake. This is O'Connor. Catch you in a presentation and have a nice day. Bye for now.